What's going on, filmmaking homies and homettes? It's your boy Cody BIue, and in today's video, I'm gonna walk you guys through every single menu setting on my Sony camera so that you guys can get your Sony camera set up for filmmaking. And then maybe you'll stop asking me questions about the menus. Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate the positive vibes that we got going here on the channel. Almost 15,000 of you guys are watching these videos, and the support has been overwhelmingly positive, especially on my last video, that winter in Tahoe video. It really meant a lot to me that I'm able to kind of jump out of a creative rut and shoot things the way that I want to shoot them, and not so much the way that everybody on YouTube is shooting videos. So it was good to know that I can do that, and you guys will still enjoy the content, and I hope to bring you more videos like that here in the future. But today we're talking about how to get your Sony camera settings dialed so that your camera is set up and ready to go for filmmaking. So this is definitely not going to be the most cinematic and entertaining video that I've ever done, but hopefully I can walk you guys through all of the menu settings and explain why I'm changing things and what I'm changing so that you can get all of your settings dialed and you can spend more time creating videos and less time fumbling with your camera. With that being said, take 10 seconds, go grab your camera, and then come on back and we'll walk you guys through every single setting to get your camera set up and ready to go for filmmaking. All right, everybody, so welcome back to my little overhead rig here. As you guys know, I shoot on the Sony a6300, so if you're shooting on the a6500 or a7S or a different Sony camera, your menu might look a little bit different than my menu does here. But for the most part, the Sony menus are relatively the same, so you should be able to find similar settings on your camera to the ones that I'm using on my camera. With that being said, there are a lot of menu options to go through here, so bear with me if this video is a little bit longer than normal, but we'll try to blast through it as fast as we can. So pull up your menu and we'll get right into it. The first thing you're going to see is the image settings, both the image size, the aspect ratio, and the image quality. I'm just going to tell you, go ahead and just set it to a JPEG quality. Make sure you don't have RAW or RAW and JPEG selected. You do want to be using a JPEG quality, and that's so that we can use the clear image zoom that is offered on some of the Sony cameras. The clear image zoom works really well. We'll talk a little bit about it more here in a second, but for now, just make sure you're set to a JPEG quality, and also make sure you're set to 16:9. That's going to be the aspect that we want to shoot in for video. It automatically changes to 16:9 anyways, but it's nice to get the full 16:9 screen here so that we can get our composition set before we start recording. So we'll move on to the next menu here. File format is XAVCS 4K and XAVCS HD for 1080p 120 frames per second. In the record setting, make sure you have 100 megs selected. You don't want to select 60 megs. That's just going to give you smaller file sizes and sacrifice image quality, so definitely go with 100 megs. Make sure you have a large SD card. That's going to give you the best image quality on your camera. Dual video recording is off. The high frame rate setting, we're not even going to bother with that because any slow motion that we're shooting, we're going to make it slow motion in post-production. So we don't want it to be slow motion in camera. We want to wait until we get into post, and then we'll choose the speed that we want to shoot. For drive mode, this is all for photos, doesn't really matter. This stuff doesn't matter. Focus mode is obviously going to be continuous autofocus for video. I don't think single autofocus is even an option. So either continuous autofocus or manual focus is what we will be shooting. For the focus area, I'm pretty much shooting in zone 100% of the time these days, either zone or manual focus. So I'm never changing away from zone. If I want to focus differently, I'll just switch to manual. So go ahead and set your focus area to zone. Autofocus illuminator doesn't really matter. Now the autofocus drive speed and the tracking sensitivity, I get a lot of questions about this, and I have both of mine set to normal. I just feel like fast is a little bit too fast and it doesn't look natural, like somebody's actually pulling focus. And then on the other end of the spectrum, slow is a little bit too slow. I do want my focus to respond relatively quick, but I want it to look natural, and I think normal is the best way to make that happen. As far as the exposure step, I have it set to 0.3, which you probably should too, although this doesn't really matter for video. It's more for your shutter speeds for photos. For video, we're going to be pretty much keeping our shutter speed the same all the time. Whenever we're shooting, our shutter speed is never going to change, so just make sure you have it set to 0.3 EV so that you can get the appropriate shutter speeds. As for ISO, this is always going to change. Mine is just set to 200 right now, but it depends on your scene and your exposure what your ISO is going to be, so this one doesn't really matter. You can have it set to whatever you want for now. Metering mode is multi. I use the multi metering mode because that's going to meter the entire screen here. Whereas the other options, center, this is a center weighted average. So it's going to take the average exposure in the center of the frame, and then spot is going to take the exposure dead in the center. But for video, I think that we want to know the exposure of the entire frame, including all of our highlights and all of our shadows. So go ahead and use multi, and then that's going to give you the exposure down here on the meter. So you have multi, and it's telling you the exposure of your entire frame, which I think is the way to go for video. For white balance, go ahead and set it to auto. I get a lot of questions about white balance, and I am using auto white balance for all of my videos. Sometime in the future, I plan on testing whether manual or auto white balance is actually better and whether it's worth it to use manual white balance, even though it takes longer. But for now, I've been shooting all of my videos in auto, and so far it has been working great for me. As far as picture effect, make sure that's turned off. Picture profile we've talked about in my Cine 4 video, but I'll blast through it real quick for you guys. Black level is +2, gamma is Cine 4, black gamma is wide and +4. Knee is manual and manually set to 80% on the point and +2 on the slope. Color mode is pro, saturation is -5, color phase is 0, color depth is +3, +1, -1, -4, -4, and +3. And detail, this is a big one for you guys, listen up. For 4K, you want your level to be -6, but for 1080p at 120 frames per second, you want it to be 0. I get a lot of questions about why my slow motion footage looks sharp and it looks good and better than most people's. That's probably because I set my level to 0. So if you're not setting your level to 0 for 1080p, make sure you go ahead and do that. And it'll just make your 1080p look a little bit better. Next up, we have zoom. This is that clear image zoom I was talking about at the beginning of this video. If you're using a prime lens or a Sony lens that doesn't have zoom, you'll have to go in and actually click zoom to use it. So you click and then you can scroll with the scroll wheel to zoom in and with the scroll wheel to zoom out. The clip you guys are actually seeing on the screen right now was shot with clear image zoom. So I use this a lot and I really like it. It gives you kind of a fake macro look. So even though I'm shooting without a macro lens, I'm getting a macro look, which I really like, and you don't lose any image quality at all. Just keep in mind that clear image zoom is only available if you're shooting in 4K, but if you are shooting in 4K, you're not gonna lose any image resolution. It's totally worth it. I'm shooting on a 35mm f1.8 right now. So with 2x digital zoom, this becomes a 70mm lens plus the crop factor. So I can get tons of reach on a single prime, and then you get a lot more options with all of your different lenses. So your prime lenses become zoom lenses, and it's just a super nice feature to have. High ISO noise reduction is mostly for photos. I just have it to normal. Center lock on, I never use lock on autofocus, so that is off. Smile and face detection is always off as well. This stuff doesn't matter. Steady shot is on for the lenses that have it, and then if I attach a lens that doesn't have it, it just goes away, so just leave it on all the time. Color space is sRGB. Auto slow shutter is on, even though for video I'm always choosing my own shutter speed, but you never know, so I have auto slow shutter turned on just in case. Audio recording is obviously on. The audio record level I can't adjust because I'm not actually in movie mode, but that's fine. I just let it do it automatically. Wind noise reduction is off. So I want the highest quality audio possible. I don't want the camera processing my audio at all. So all the noise reduction that I do in post-production. So go ahead and leave that off and fix it in post. Next up, we have the memory option. We'll come back to this in just a second. I want to get through all of the menu options first, and then we'll set the memory for our cameras. Next, we have our zebras. I have mine set to 100. Sometimes I'll do 100 plus, but lately I've really been liking them just being at 100, especially for Cine 4. It lets me know when my highlights are starting to blow out. So yeah, I set it to 100, and then I try not to see zebras if I don't have to, but obviously sometimes we will let our highlights blow out if we need to. Manual focus assist is on. This is when your camera zooms in to help you set your focus. The magnification time is 2 seconds. That's personal preference. Autofocus in focus magnification, that's up to you. I have it turned on. Grid line is set to the rule of thirds. I would recommend you guys use the rule of thirds grid on your display. Just helps you with composition a little bit, getting your lines straight, things like that. I don't use any markers, so markers are turned off. Marker settings don't matter. Audio level display is on. This just shows my audio bars when I'm recording so that I can see if my audio is peaking or if it looks good, if I need to make any adjustments, things like that. Auto review is off. This stuff is for photos mainly. Display button, make sure you go in and on your monitor you have histogram selected. I really like to use the histogram a lot when I'm shooting video. So once you're on your screen, you just push display a couple of times and your histogram will pop up there. That just helps you with exposure a little bit better than the meter does down here. So I like to look at my histogram quite a bit when I'm exposing my image. As far as focus peaking, I have it set to low, and my peaking color is set to red. I just think the red stands out really nicely on most backgrounds. I mean, unless you're shooting something that is red, but that's very rarely the case, so I think red works best. Exposure set guide, this is just a little guide that pops up when you change your shutter speeds and stuff. You can have that set on or off, that's totally up to you. I have it on. The setting effect you definitely want on, so like if you change your white balance or something like that, it's gonna actually display on the screen all of the changes that you're making, so you can see kind of what's going on while you're shooting. Autofocus area, auto clear, that's off. Display continuous autofocus area is on. This just shows us where our autofocus area is. As you can see, it's on the right, now it's in the middle, but you can see there's a little square there. So that's nice so that you know where your autofocus is set and you can make sure your subject is within that zone. Pre-AF, just turn it off. That's like the worst feature ever. I don't know why it's on there. Some photographers might like it, but I think it's terrible. Don't use it. Zoom setting on, clear image zoom. This is that clear image zoom we were talking about that allows you to zoom in when you're shooting in 4K. Make sure you have that turned on if you want to use it. This stuff is up to you. Right now I have my monitor set to manual just so it doesn't disappear if I cover the viewfinder, but that's up to you as well. A lot of times I'll leave it on auto. I just have it on manual for this demonstration. This stuff doesn't really matter for you guys. Priority set and autofocus continuous, I have it set to balanced emphasis. That's probably what I would recommend for you guys as well. Autofocus with shutter. So your shutter button, when you buy a camera and it comes out of the box, usually your shutter button will autofocus, but personally I like that turned off. I don't want to accidentally push my shutter button and have the camera focus, so that's off. Auto exposure lock with shutter, that's mainly for photos, but I have that turned on. This stuff doesn't matter. So the function menu, it's totally up to you what you want to set yours, but I'll just blast through mine real quick. Drive mode, audio level display, flash compensation, focus mode, focus area, exposure compensation, ISO, metering mode, white balance, center lock on, autofocus, creative style, and shooting mode. That's just for this function menu right here. You push the function menu and your options come up. You can choose whatever options you want for that menu. Custom keys. So these are the custom keys that I use when I'm shooting, and these are probably some of the biggest tips I can give you guys. So custom button 1, which is on top of the camera here, is the focus magnification. I have that set for focus magnification because I have a couple vintage lenses that I use sometimes, occasionally, that don't actually communicate with the body of the camera. So when I turn the lens to focus, it doesn't automatically zoom in, but it's easy to overcome that by just pushing the C1 button here, and then it's gonna zoom in and I can set my focus that way. So if you're using any lenses with adapters or any lens that won't communicate with the camera body, it's nice to have your focus magnification right there on the body so that you can zoom in and get your focus dialed. Custom button 2, this is probably my most used custom button and totally changed my filmmaking when I found out that you could do this. So I have custom button 2, which is down here, which is also your trash can button, set to autofocus, manual focus, control toggle. So this is really nice because I can set my focus wherever I want, and then I can just click and my focus will turn off. So for example, say I have a subject on the left part of the screen, I can set my focus there, I can focus on them, which it's not gonna focus right now because the camera's pointed down, but I can focus on my subject. I know I have tack sharp focus, and then I can turn that focus off. So anything that walks in front of the screen, or if I'm panning, you know, and a tree gets in the way or something like that, it's not gonna mess up my focus. My focus is gonna stay locked on my subject. And then when I'm ready to shoot in autofocus again, I just click the button and my autofocus is back to normal. So that's super convenient. I really like that. And I would suggest you guys set your custom button to autofocus, manual focus as well. It's just super nice to not have to go into any of the menus to turn focus on and off, especially if your lens doesn't have a manual focus autofocus switch like this one does not. Some of my other custom keys, the center button is the focus standard. That just means you can change your focus by clicking the center button. So you click, you can move it, you click again to set it. Same thing, you click, you can move it, you click again to set it. So that's all that focus standard is there. Let's go back in. The rest I haven't changed. So left is drive mode, right is ISO, down is exposure compensation. I use this right ISO button all the time when I'm shooting video because I'm constantly changing my ISO. Super handy to have it just right there on the dial. Next up, we have the AEL button and the AF/MF button. So like I said before, I don't use the shutter button to focus. I actually use this back button right here. So the way that we can set that is we have two options. We have the switch down, which is AEL, and we have the switch up, which is AF/MF. So I have the down AEL button set to autofocus on, which is just my standard autofocus. The switch is down and I'll push this button here to focus. So I'll push the button and then that way I don't have to worry about my shutter button messing with my focus whatsoever. So you push it and your camera will focus. If you wanted to and you had a subject looking at the camera where you can see their eyes, you can actually flick the switch up and then this button is going to focus just on their eyes. So if you want to get tag sharp focus on a model, you can use eye autofocus, but 99% of the time I'm using just the regular AEF on with the AEL switch set down. So yeah, that's just super nice. I really like to set my focus on the back here. It's really good for photography as well. So instead of focusing here, you can focus here and snap your picture and it's not gonna mess anything up. The focus hold button, this is for lenses that actually have a button on the side. This lens doesn't, so we won't really worry about that. The rest here doesn't really matter. These are custom keys for playback, so that's all personal preference stuff. The movie button, we want the movie button to always start recording video, so make sure that's set to always. The dial wheel lock, I have that off. And let's continue through the rest here real quick. These don't matter. We'll go to the last menu here. Monitor brightness is set to sunny weather just because it makes the monitor a lot brighter. It does kill your battery a little bit quicker, but I'm not too concerned with that. Viewfinder brightness is set to auto. Gamma display assist, for those of you guys that shoot an S-Log2, this is like a built-in LUT for your camera that'll help you with exposure a little bit. I personally never really used it, but you might want to check it out if you do shoot S-Log2. Volume settings, this is just the camera stuff. I use audio signals. It helps me know when I'm recording and when I'm not recording. This stuff doesn't matter. Auto power off temperature, make sure this is set to high, especially if you're on the A6300 with the overheating issues. By setting that to high, your camera's gonna last a lot longer. Actually, ever since I've set this to high, my camera has never powered off from overheating. So I would definitely recommend you set that to high. Otherwise, the rest of this stuff doesn't really matter for you guys. So let's go back and talk about that memory real quick. Now that we have our entire menu dialed, we can set our memory for our camera. So I have my memory dials set right on the top here, number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is my 4K at 24 frames per second, and number 2 is my 1080p at 120 frames per second. So the way that we can set those is you want to make sure everything in your menu is set, which we just went through and did that, and then you want to make sure your camera settings are set. So for 4K, we want our shutter to be 1/50. My aperture, I just have set as wide open as possible. That way, whichever lens I attach, it's going to be wide open, and then I can adjust it from there. But I want them to start wide open because I do shoot a lot of my footage wide open. The rest doesn't really matter. We're always going to change our ISO, so you can just set it to 200 for now. And then once you have all of that set, we can go in and we'll go to our memory and we'll make sure everything looks good. We have autofocus continuous, zone autofocus, we're at 16:9, 24p tells me I'm in 4K, everything looks good. And then we can just click the center button to save that. And then we'll want to go in and save number 2 for our 1080p. So what we can do is we'll adjust our shutter speed to 1/250 because we're shooting in 120 frames per second. Same thing, leave the aperture wide open, leave the ISO at 200. We're gonna wanna make sure we change the XAVCS to XAVCS HD. That way we're in 1080p at 120 frames per second, 100 megs. And then don't forget, go into your picture profile, change the detail level to 0. And now we can save this to our memory too. So we'll go back into our menu and we'll go back to memory, and we'll go to memory 2 and save. Again, make sure everything looks good. Autofocus continuous, zone, we're got 120p, our shutter speed is correct, our aperture is correct, and we made sure to change our picture profile. Click the center button to save and you'll be good to go. So those are all the tips that I have for you guys. That's my entire Sony menu. I would definitely recommend you set your dial buttons, set your custom 1 and your custom 2, and you guys will be ready to go. Filmmaking is gonna be so much easier for you guys. So there you go, guys. Those are every single one of the settings that I've changed on my A6300, including the custom buttons, in order to get the most out of it as a filmmaking camera. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message on Instagram or leave them down in the comments below, but I'm still not getting YouTube comment notifications, so I've been trying to go through and check, but if I miss your comment, I'm sorry. Try to send it to me on Instagram and I'll reply there. But please like this video if you like it and subscribe if you want to see more. But until next time, we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.